Good evening and welcome to the Monday, August 14, 2017 Board of Education meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I think before we start to do some of the business parts of the meeting, if we could perhaps go to item 8.1 on the agenda, which is to introduce the new principal at Guildford Lakes. Would you like to start, Dr. Freeman?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. I am pleased to announce that on July 31st, in a special but untelevised meeting, the Board of Education appointed Mrs. Mandy Ryan as our new principal at Lakes Elementary School. We have asked Mrs. Ryan to be with us here tonight because we're excited to introduce her to the community. Mrs. Ryan comes to us after 9 years in the old Saybrook school system. She was an administrator in that system for 9 years, 1 year as the interim director of curriculum instruction and assessment, but most significantly for us in the last 4 years as principal of Old Saybrook Middle School. She has an exceptional reputation around the school district. She was the unanimous choice of a principal search committee that came together. We had a very competitive pool of candidates. In fact, we had sitting principals from a number of successful school districts around the state of Connecticut. We are excited to have Mrs. Ryan join the team, and in fact, later in the meeting when I update you on our administrative retreat, Mandy just worked her first full day in Guildford today. In fact, she took vacation time from Old Saybrook to be with us with our full leadership team in day one of our annual summer retreat, and will be joining us tomorrow and Wednesday as well. She participated, she held her own, she contributed to the work that we did today, and I think she left excited about joining this Guildford community. So it is a pleasure to introduce Mandy Ryan to the greater Guildford community, and more specifically to the Lakes Elementary School community.
Well, welcome, Mrs. Ryan. If you could just come up and maybe just tell us a little bit about what brings you to Guildford, what are some of your goals at Guildford Lakes School, and what do you think moving forward?
Sure. First of all, the word excited has come out of my mouth so many times since the 31st. I've had a really wide range of experiences educationally, but this, to me, the commitment that Guildford puts toward adult learning as well as student learning, and it all goes hand in hand, is just top of the line. And for me to come and be challenged and to learn every day is something I'm so excited for. And I was sharing, Mr. Bloss, with you earlier, is that in the interview with the board, one of the things that impressed me so much was when we talked about every student and that there are no redos for our children, and that we're held to such high expectations as administrators and as teachers. And it is something that is true to my core values as an educator, that every child and every interaction is so important. And that was clear today so much in our retreat throughout, and Ann and I had conversations about that. But just sharing that vision and the commitment to learning to create an environment experience for every single child is thrilling to me, and I look forward to it. I sent a letter out to families and to staff introducing myself, and the responses was just so welcoming. And parents and staff talked about the community and how important the community is, and it just was a fit, and it felt really good for me, and I'm really thrilled, and today was a great day, and I can't wait for tomorrow, and I can't wait till the 25th when I'm really officially here, but it's already been amazing, so I look forward to moving forward.
Terrific.
We're happy that you're here.
Thank you. Me too.
Dr. Ballestero, you were on the search committee. Can you just maybe talk a little bit about what the process was, and
Absolutely.
And what led to Mrs. Ryan's
Absolutely, yeah. No, it was, so I was a member of the search committee. There were teachers, parents, another elementary school principal, as well as, obviously, Dr. Freeman and Dr. Keene. There were meetings at Guildford Lakes in which parents were invited, and then faculty were invited the week before we did interviews. And then after Dr. Freeman and his team fielded a number of applications. The committee was brought 4 candidates, of which Mandy was one. And we had an opportunity to spend an hour with each candidate in a really structured way in which we asked questions, received feedback, and then met as a group. And it's very exciting. Mandy certainly did rise to the top. We forwarded as a committee 2 candidates to I was going to say a secondary process. It was like a third or fourth piece of the puzzle.
It was a performance assessment was
Right.
really what happened. Yep.
And of the 2 candidates, Mandy again rose to the top in that process. So I am thrilled that you're here. It's very exciting, and I think the entire committee was really pleased that Mandy was our final candidate.
Well, welcome officially to the town of Guildford and the Guildford Public Schools. We look forward to working with you, and we're glad that you have chosen to continue your career with the faculty and children and parents of the Guildford Lake Schools. So,
Thank you. I'm equally as excited, so
terrific.
thank you for bringing me here tonight, too.
Sure.
Okay, so why don't we go to the minutes? 3.1 is the July 10, 2017 special meeting, then July 10 regular meeting, and then July 31st special meeting. So is there a motion relating to the July 10 special meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All right, don't be bashful, folks. I know we're out of practice, but we can do this. We've done it before. Are there any corrections, changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 3.2, July 10, 2017 regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, changes, corrections?
I had just one. Item number 5. I'm given credit for being the reviewer, but I didn't do it. Gary Kaysen did it.
Okay,
So that needs to change in a couple spots.
okay. Anything else? All right, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? And then July 31st, 2017 special meeting, that's the one where Mrs. Ryan was appointed. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second, okay. Any changes, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I should also note that I think Mrs. Walker, I see here, and she is here for one agenda item, although, of course, always welcome to stay for the entire meeting, but perhaps with some alternative ways to use her time. You're here on 9.4 on the agenda? Okay, why don't we go ahead and take that up now? That's to approve a $10,000 donation from the Adams PTO for a sound system in the gymnasium. So would you like to tell us about that?
Right. Well, our PTO raises funds just through membership, and it's been numbers of years since we've actually asked for or gotten a major gift, and this is a significant gift. So as this happened, we were at a basketball game, the Unified Sports basketball game at Baldwin, the Fill the Seats game. And I went up there, and they had this great sound system where and it booms through the entire gym. And I said, why don't we have something like that? So we started looking, talked with the company that put it in at Baldwin a number of years ago, and got some estimates. And I approached the PTO, and they said this would be wonderful. So the cost estimate, I think, is just under $10,000. So they've given us this gift of up to $10,000 to put in a sound system. And the sound system will be used certainly at our closing ceremony, which many of you have attended, and we have just a podium is what we have as our sound system. And but at all basketball games, youth basketball games and so on, we'll use it as well. It's really just going to be a plug-in system, but I think there are going to be 16 speakers. It'll look a little like Madison Square Garden on it. 16 speakers throughout the ceiling between the rafters in the gym. So we're really excited. It will be done, if you approve this gift, we'll then work with Cliff Gurnham on the exact specifications, and then it will be done hopefully before Christmas.
Great.
Very exciting gift, and we're very appreciative to the PTO.
Absolutely.
And under our policy, we have to approve it because it's so big, and I'm sure somebody would like to make a motion to approve it. Second?
Second.
Any other questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, terrific. That's terrific.
Fabulous.
And I'm sure Dr. Freeman
Thank you
will
very
do
much.
We will extend our thanks. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay. Item 4, public forum for topics on the board agenda. Anybody want to speak? I'm going to guess no. Item 5 on the agenda is a review of the expenditures for the month of July. And Ms. Sullivan.
So we have 2 reports to review tonight. One for the last of the financials for the 2016-17 fiscal year, and then the month of July going forward into our next fiscal year. So we'll start with 16-17. The expenditures for the month of July were $750,000 and a little bit extra. The encumbrances and expenditures through the end of July were 99.94% of the budget, and it's almost identical to last year, which was 99.96. There were budget transfers that were approved at our last regular meeting in July, and there will be a request for an additional budget transfer later on in tonight's agenda. We did talk about it at length in the operations meeting prior to this. We were able to, Guildford from time to time gets students into our special education program from other towns because of services we provide, and those towns then reimburse us in tuition, and that occurred, and we didn't originally account for it. And so we did end up with a little additional money, and were able to purchase some equipment and supplies that would have been in next year's budget. So we've already accomplished that, which is a good thing. And unless anyone has any questions, I don't know if we have to do these 2 separately or all one.
I think all one is fine, yeah.
All right. So 2017-18. The expenditures were $2.5 million, 6.24 of the budget. Last year we were 4.94, and I believe that is because of the HSA contributions that we didn't have last year. So that was paid out. I don't think there was anything else. There was a little bit of revenue for the pre-K program at Lakes, $2,600. And I will say the same thing, unless there's any questions. This is a motion to accept both of these reports.
Okay, motion's been made. Second?
Second?
Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Ms. Sullivan can't be at the Board of Finance meeting next Tuesday, and she's asking for a volunteer to attend if possible. I don't think it's as urgent as it might be in some months, given the relatively.
You don't have to tell me now.
Yeah. But yeah, if somebody can cover for that this Tuesday at 7:30.
The 22nd, yeah. Tuesday.
Okay. I can't do it myself, but if somebody can do it, just shoot.
Mr. Bowden and Mrs. Trudeau will both be there. If necessary, they can cover.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
But also speaking of finances, there is a sign-up sheet for reviewing for starting as early as next month. And I guess Dr. Myers and Ms. Renner are exempt from this particular function. So I'll just start this over there. And if we could take maybe earlier dates rather than later dates for now. And then we'll obviously have some new members after the election. And I wouldn't think that having a new member do it the first month after the election is a great idea, but we can figure that out. Linda says no. Not a good idea. That's fine. Okay. Item 6, communications. I don't think I had any. Anything?
Nothing.
No? Okay. All right. Student reps, no report. Item 8, superintendent's report.
So we have already introduced Mrs. Ryan to the Guildford community. As I mentioned in that portion of my report, today was the first day of our annual administrative retreat. The way that this 3-day retreat has been structured is that much of today was spent looking back at work that we did last year. Principals worked together in first separately, sharing from each other's work, and then in like grade level groups, reviewing the new homework policy that has been approved by the Board of Education and working on the guidelines that are required by that new policy at each grade level. So again, at first, the principals finished last year by talking to all of their staffs and beginning to draft those guidelines. They worked cross grade levels, so that Mr. Macenti was working with some of his elementary colleagues and sharing the work that they have done and providing feedback to each other on the work that they had done, and then moving back into their grade level teams as they prepare to roll out and then monitor those homework guidelines in each and every one of their buildings. We looked back at the significant work that we put into the high leverage instructional practices that we spoke with all of you about across the school year last year. We will spend much of tomorrow taking a much deeper dive into what principals can do to implement and maintain high leverage practices to really have an impact on student learning. And Dr. Allison Escher from the Institute for Learning will be joining us tomorrow to work with our principals in that work. We looked at our specials. We looked at how we are supporting teachers in our school district who are teaching subjects other than English language arts, math, science, and social studies, and how we will continue to support those teachers and how we will continue to make sure that those high leverage instructional practices live in each and every one of our special subject areas as well as in our core subject areas. We looked at a recent research article that came out just in April of this past year in Kaplan Magazine that talks about what instruction looks like in truly high-performing school districts. And we looked at whether or not we're meeting the expectations of that research article. And specifically, that article talks about not just the content and academic expectations, but the interpersonal and intrapersonal expectations that students have in this world of 21st century skills. And quite honestly, it begins to address concerns that many school districts are having around stress and anxiety. And we had a really rich conversation about what we can do. And in fact, the principals were tasked today with identifying 2 weeks early in the school system where they will collect a random sampling of all the instructional tasks that are asked of their students in a 2-week period. And we will begin analyzing those tasks to be sure that they're not just meeting expectations for academic rigor, but also growing intrapersonal and interpersonal skill sets within our students. And in fact, the principals were interested in knowing that we're going to share that work with the board as we unroll workshop meetings with you early in this school year. We also did an overview of the summative assessment information that we've received. Dr. Keene, in just a few minutes, will be giving the board a similar presentation. Today was sort of the survey course of the retreat. Tomorrow will be a deep dive into those high leverage instructional practices. And then on Wednesday, we will have Jason Stricker, who is the CEO of Inside Education. Currently, Inside Education is working with school districts like LA Unified School District and, in fact, the Guildford County School District in North Carolina.
That's funny.
But it is a school district of 76,000 students. So, yeah, a slightly different set. But Inside Education has become interested in the work that we're doing in Guildford. And, in fact, Jason is joining us at no cost to us, because he's coming to look closely at what we're doing here in Guildford and to shape the work that he and his company have been doing in much larger districts in a way that would fit a high-performing suburban school district like ours. And so it's an interesting symbiotic relationship, I think, that we're going to be able to generate and both benefit from the activities that we'll engage in on Wednesday. We relocated the retreat. We're not going off-site. We met here in the high school today. We will be meeting here for the rest of the week. Not only are we excited to have Mandy Ryan joining us, but we're also excited to have Mike Regan joining us. We have 2 new administrative members to our team as we launch into this retreat. It was a rich day. It was a challenging day. It was a good day. We're looking forward to the next 2. And unless there's any questions.
Any questions on that? Comments? Okay.
And Dr. Keene is prepared to share an overview of the initial SBAC results that we have received.
Okay.
So we are getting results from all of our summative assessments in pieces and parts. But these did come in July. Well, actually the very end of June. You probably saw an announcement in the paper. And so this is an overview. We don't have the individual reports for parents yet. Since that time, as late as today, the alternate assessments were released, and the science capped in CMT. So this is just the Smarter Balance, and so some of these slides may look familiar, but I'll give you a quick overview of the results. But in your packet, you have some of the actual graphs and some of the big slides that I thought might interest you the most. But for the benefit of the community, there are 3 reasons we give a state summative assessment. There is a legal requirement that we do it. It is a matter of equity, that all students participate and that we're not hiding somebody, or, we're really looking at all of our kids. And it is our responsibility to administer them. The state summative assessments, and I like to tell the principals, are really like an annual checkup when you go to the doctor. It is not the time when you're going in there to say, this is wrong, and this is wrong with me. But it's more of the time when the doctor is checking you over, looking at all of the, a general global look, and then decided, maybe you need another test here. Or maybe, let's look at your blood work to see if everything is working correctly. And so that is what a summative test, these kinds of global measures are. Then if there's more work to be done, it's our first way of looking deeper. So it's not useful as the only measure for student achievement or for school or districts or even the state. It is not useful as the guidance for curriculum or instruction. The standards are how we write our curriculum and what we look at for instruction. And we do not teach to the test, and we do not think that is quality instruction. So the summative test also is not useful as a substitute for other things that we should be doing. Things like our classroom assessments, our teacher observations, our student work samples, progress monitoring, or detailed diagnostic assessment or evaluation of students that we just can't really figure out. So here's some quick background information. It was administered in Guildford from April 17th to May 19th. That was considered the Guildford window. It was much shorter than the state window. And it is important for you to know, I think, too, that the test items are developed by educators and assessment experts from all the consortia states, including Connecticut. And we do have one of our literacy coaches participated this year in writing assessment items, and we felt that that was a big benefit to us, just even though she can't share items, but understanding the process, and that's important. So in the language arts assessment, students really are measured at 3 claims: reading, listening, and then writing and research inquiry. So basically we expect students to read closely, to comprehend a range of increasingly complex literary and informational text. We expect them to employ effective speaking and listening skills for a range of purposes and audiences. There is a lot of listening that happens on this test. It sounds a little bit like a podcast, and kids are really having to get stuff from the listening part and testing their oral skills. And then in writing, they have to produce effective and well-grounded writing for a range of purposes and audiences, and look at research and inquiry to investigate topics and to analyze, integrate, and present information. In mathematics, there are also 3 claims. One is they're looking for the concepts and procedures. The second is communicating and reasoning, and the third is a combination of the problem solving and modeling and data analysis, so that students can apply mathematics in real world problems, that they can precisely construct viable arguments, and that they can use mathematical models to interpret and solve. So basically we get a scale score for each student. A scale score ranges from 2,000 to 3,000, and it's beneficial because we can look at growth over time. Even though we can individually look at student to student, there will be a growth report released later this month from the state, so we can look at our growth with exactly matched students. Because if I take last year's report and I look at this year's report, it's not going to match perfectly because we have some students who have moved out, some students who have moved in. There may be some students who were in, they had a special ed IEP last year, but maybe they don't this year. So there are changes going on all the time. But the scale scores do look at achievement levels, and I know that parents and board members are used to hearing about level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. But those are really oversimplified terms, but they do kind of give us a general starting point if we want to look at a particular group of students. Parents will also receive a performance category saying, is my child above the standard, or at or near the standard, or below the standard in each of those claims that I described earlier. So what we're going to look at tonight is some of the achievement change. That is different children from third grade one year to third grade the next year to third grade in the third year, but looking over time at how a grade level is doing, knowing that these are different kids. All right? The second thing, we'll look at what we call the rough cohort change, and looking at the third graders from 2 years ago to the fourth graders last year to the fifth graders this year, knowing that we have some movement in and out. It is not a perfect student-to-student match, but it is a rough estimate of growth. So these are the results. And in English Language Arts, you can see by grade level how they did in 14-15, 15-16, and 16-17. And you can notice that there is a decline from last year in English Language Arts, with the exception of grade 7 and grade 5. These are all grades put together, so you can see over time. But when we look at our vertical scale scores, this is that rough estimate. You can see how the same group of students, rough estimate of the group of students, the scale score in third grade to fourth grade to fifth grade. Well, we would expect them to grow because they're getting older, and we will have more explicit growth measures around this data. Here's the results of mathematics, and you can see a slightly different look when we're looking at achievement by grade. You're seeing an increase, a considerable increase
In some grades.
in all the grades except for grade 5, where we did see the increase in language arts, but in grade 5 is a very slight increase. But if you want to go back and look at grade 5 from the first year, there was a significant increase from 2014-15 to 15-16. And the same is true looking in the color codes of the scale scores so that we're seeing where the growth is. Until we have more analysis and start looking at the individual level, we only have relative analysis. And so we compare ourselves to how's the rest of our district reference group doing. And you also have a copy of this chart. So this is the district overall compared to the 19 districts that are most like Guildford as far as the demographics and socioeconomics are concerned. And this is where we fall in English language arts, given that we're measuring the percent of students at level 3 or greater. That means they are proficient or advanced in English language arts. And this is where we fell. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can see the schools above us and the schools below us in English language arts.
From where we were last
Yes,
year.
it was.
Yep.
It is. And we're having those kind of conversations right now. But here's our math.
Which is up from where we were last
Which
year.
is up
Yes.
significantly.
Yeah.
All right, so I know this is all preliminary, but have you got a theory as to what's going on here?
Well, we've started having the conversations today about what might be different and some of our, but one of the big pieces is that we have put a big focus on mathematics, and a lot of support and a lot of attention has gone, and have we at the same time, you know, especially at the elementary level, when you're focusing on, you can't focus on everything all the time. And so did that have a difference? We also administered the test in a different order this year. We did math before we did English language arts. And so we're wondering, did test fatigue? And so we are really analyzing a lot of different criteria. All of our literacy coaches had new assignments this year. So they were spending a lot of time developing relationships, you know, and because they all went to different schools this year. We reduced by 1, and we made several changes, which we think were very, very beneficial, but that might have been another reason.
Is there not conversation happening at the state level about whether or not the assessment this year was more challenging than it had been in previous years?
Well,
think this is a
overall
new
at the
test.
state, the English language arts was down overall.
Our pattern is not unique.
Yeah. But we are still not saying that's not a good enough reason. You know, we're
No,
looking at our own.
but per Dr. Freeman's point, right, this is a fairly new test, so we don't have a longstanding pattern
Correct.
established anywhere, statewide or individually. And this kind of across-the-board lower scores could indicate something
Absolutely.
systematic about the not systematic, something specific about the test, perhaps. I mean, again, it's new.
Right, and to Dr. Keen's analogy to the annual physical, these results give us good information to ask good, thoughtful questions
Right.
about instruction. And so we can look at our math scores and say, so what's working, what are we doing right, and how do we continue to invest in that, and what questions do we need to ask about English language arts, where we've had a trajectory of improvement over the last 10 years, I think. Now we have different questions to ask this year. And so to give appropriate credit, while we began having those conversations as a whole leadership team today, Dr. Keen has met with, I think, every principal in the district at this point to begin looking at these results, to begin looking at these data at the building level so that we can begin to pull the information back together as a whole district, ask really thoughtful questions to hopefully make really strategic decisions moving forward. And that's what these tests are intended to provide.
But the I guess from the perspective of the board, the puzzling thing is that in the English language arts, where we have an established cohort of coaches, we had a decline. And in the area where we've identified that we need more coaching, which is
Having them put in
math,
place.
and we don't have them in place, we actually had the thing go up, the scores go up. This is counterintuitive in some way to me.
Well, I think it's also, it seems counterintuitive, But I think that we have to do a lot more digging
No,
into
no,
the data.
I understand that this is preliminary.
But I think that you've got to also look at our overall score in English language arts.
Right.
Even though it was a little bit decline, it is 78.1% of our students scoring 3 and above on the computer adaptive test. In math, it's just 75.6.
So we're still doing better in raw measures in English language arts than we are in math.
Well,
It's going to be
it
easier
could
to
also
move up.
be that the tests
Correct.
are
Yeah.
different,
There's an endless
are
number of
scaled
Right.
differently.
Absolutely.
So, and it's worth pointing out that in mathematics, we haven't been simply waiting for the advent
Right.
of math coaches. We haven't put all of the eggs in that basket. We brought in new teaching materials
Right.
3 years ago now.
Right.
And I
And
believe
so the
Barbara Dudley
teachers are
always
up to
remind us it
speed.
took 3 years to come up.
They're up to speed
Exactly.
using that. I understand that.
So,
So we-
it was a little rushed, frankly, to do this presentation tonight. Dr. Freeman, actually, on behalf of Dr. Keene, said, "Are you really sure you want to do this tonight?" Before we were able to get into each of the levels, and I said,
Right.
"Yeah, look, come on, let's just do a quick review of it, just because it's out there in the public domain, and we ought to have some idea about it." But just to, but we will dig into it a little bit more.
Absolutely.
And so, for example, let's say that there are. Where people are in either level 1 or level 2 matters very much also. So if the bulk of our people that are not at level 3 or 4 are in
Somebody stand up and
I'll take care of that.
are in level 2, say they're at
It's
the
energy saving measure.
so if they're at the top of level 2,
Right,
that's a
right.
very different situation than
That's
at the
right.
bottom of level 1. And just so we're clear about the this is 5 grades, right? So the difference between 7th in the reference group and 1st in the reference group is 15 kids, approximately.
Correct.
So
Correct.
let's,
Yes.
we just we don't want to get, so there's at least a hypothetical chance that there are 15 kids that have 1 or 2 questions separating them from level 2 and level 3. That's the difference between 1st and 7th. Okay, now, I don't think that's the case. On the other hand, let's get into the data a little bit more.
Yep, exactly
It's
right.
it's a fine, I think the results in math are tremendous. Yeah.
Mr. Voss also in support of the direction you're going in. The difference in language arts, if we're looking at rankings, and we know not to take them too seriously, but it's 3 percentage points.
Right.
I mean, there's the statistical significance of
Yeah.
ourselves there and those immediately surrounding us doesn't exist.
Right.
So.
And these are all good districts.
Yes, yeah. So
Right.
I think it's probably a whole host of things, and I agree that we should look at all of them. But with a test that's been around for 2 or 3 years, there's a stability factor that may not have been yet achieved at the state level in terms of what gets presented to kids in terms of a test.
Sure.
Could you help me out on one thing? Because I have a couple of constituents who have asked me about this. Madison is very vocal about not wanting to take this test. And my understanding is their participation rates are quite low. Is that still the case?
I can go in and check. We can look at their participation rates. It's all on
Last
the
year,
inside.
they were below 90%.
I don't think they're as low as they were.
I believe that they're coming up, but we'd have to look. That's not information that I think either one of us has at the top of our
Okay.
heads. We
But
do,
it's certainly available. I think that's on its site.
we do know that our participation rates are very high. We believe they're around 99%, north of 99%.
Yeah, right.
One thing maybe that if we have questions that we want the
Please.
administration to be able to answer at the September meeting,
Yep.
if just email them to Dr.
Right.
Keene or Dr. Freeman. But that's a fair question, right? What are the participation rates in some of these districts? I mean, it's kind of hard to know which way that plays, right? How does that affect the numbers? Which direction does it affect the numbers?
Hard to know.
It's hard to know.
Right.
It is. It's impossible.
Depends
That's
what
why
people select in or
I
select
worry
out.
about comparing,
right.
Yeah.
because comparing also is, some of these districts are very different sizes. So their numbers are much more stable than for smaller districts. Then you also have districts that might have or might serving more kids with more second language learners or more students with disabilities. And so looking at them that way too, it really makes a relative performance. But like I said earlier, this is really all we have right now. And certainly it is important, and we will be presenting data to our staff members, and the principals work most of the afternoon just around the data. But some of the implications that we come out with early on is that we want to have a renewed focus on literacy skills, and not just literacy skills, because it's also scientific literacy. Mm-hmm. It's also literacy in the social sciences. It's also literacy in informational literacy in technology education. So it's not just an English language arts issue. It is literacy in all the content areas too. And so we've really got to make sure that everybody is on board. And we do need to do some additional analysis of our subgroups and of our individual students. So that kind of gives you a little bit of information about where we stand. I think the big news is math really came up. And it's, I guess, the first time we've been there in mathematics. We've been there several times in English language arts, but not in mathematics. There are a couple of really important links that tell us more about the test, about how it's constructed, and actually give sample items. And I know that all of you have participated in that previously, but there may be some parents who would be interested. So at the beginning of the school year, parents should be getting their individual reports for students, and before school starts, teachers will begin analyzing the data for their students that they had last year.
I just feel compelled to comment on your analogy about the physical exam.
I wanted to be.
The physical exam is really the annual physical is a dynamic relationship between a clinician and a patient. And therefore there's feedback and there's a process. A better analogy is a chemist looking to analyze a specimen.
Okay.
Because that's clear to the student body as opposed to the human body and the clinician.
Got it.
So this will be on, I guess, next month's agenda, assuming you're able to.
We should have them.
If we have more to share,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so any questions, I think, just email
But
them.
please let me know, in between,
Yep.
if you have any
And then we'll make
specific
sure to have
questions.
information you're looking for.
Can I just ask a clarification question? You had just mentioned that the teachers before the start of the year will be reviewing the test scores, and you said of their students last year. So will the teachers be looking at the test scores of their incoming students?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
They will have
Clarify
access,
that.
principals have access to scores, even the scores of the incoming students from different buildings. So they begin to look at that to say, okay,
Who needs
does this show?
some
But
support?
remember, this is kind of a global look, so
Right.
we don't want to take too much value, but it might say, ooh, we need to think about this for this child, or it's just the beginning of more information. But it's one measure that tells us a little bit about the children that are coming into our room. Now that's only available, of course, to 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers. So there's only 5 grades that impacts. The high school does have access to the 8th grade scores, and they look at that to get to know the 9th graders a little bit.
The look back allows the teacher to look curricularly and say, is there something that I need to do differently than I've done for groups in the past? The look at the current students allows the teacher to take a cohort approach and look at what might this group need that is different than the group I had last year. So yes, they look at their outgoing students and they look at their incoming students if that information is available for that grade level.
Thank you.
Okay. 8.4 is the update on the elementary school enrollment.
Yep. So you have an enrollment sheet in your packets. I'll remind the board that the official enrollments are taken on October 1st, but this is a snapshot of what we know for enrollment at this moment in time. So two observations that I would share. One is that K through 4, our average class size at this moment is in fact 18.1, which is in fact down from what we had last year where we were running class averages of about 18.5. However, the distribution is not as clean. Last year I pointed out to you that it was some of the most even distribution that we had ever had, with class groupings that were very close together across the district. We have some significant highs and lows this year. We have significant lows running currently at Cox, at the K level, and in fact those have dropped. Those were up by a few students just a few weeks ago. We had some current students who were in the system who have withdrawn, who have relocated. And you will notice spikes, particularly at LEAT at the 3rd grade level. This was a group that since kindergarten had been running 2 class sections of about 18 or 19. And over the year last year, we had approximately half a dozen students move into 3rd grade in LEAT and run those numbers up significantly.
Can we get some real estate agents?
I wish they would consult with me.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
So, what I would tell you is that it is, in fact, a lower elementary enrollment than we had last year, a distribution, a lower class size average, but with more highs and lows than we've had in the past. We will continue to monitor this, although we are coming to the end of that monitoring window. We will need to make some decisions. And I probably should have ordered my report slightly differently. I probably should have talked about the situation at the state level budgetarily, because while in past years we have monitored and made staffing adjustments at this late date in the summer. In fact, there was a year not too long ago where we added 2 unbudgeted teaching positions to adjust. I am much more hesitant this year about adding any unbudgeted staffing positions into this this class distribution when we do not have a budget at the state level and do not have a definitive idea of what we will be receiving in educational funding from the state. So we're continuing to watch it. I will tell you that Mr. Grimm and I have been discussing grade 3. We're talking about it regularly. I will note that in addition to the 2 classroom teachers, there is a full-time special education teacher assigned to grade 3 as well. And so while that special education teacher has a caseload of students, that teacher is also present in the classrooms. And when you think of our co-teaching model, those teachers are working carefully to talk about groupings and how can small group instruction take place. At times that special ed teacher may take students from both of these classes and group them together. Mr. Grimm is watching those numbers. I'm watching those numbers. If there's a significant change in the next 2 weeks, we have time to make staffing changes if necessary. I do just want to note that I'm being much more conservative about any decisions in that direction, not having a budget and not having clear numbers on what we'll be receiving from the state right now.
And given you're saying that, you're going to make a comment that's probably obvious to all of us and know that it may likely change. We know, right, that for elementary schools, we're going to have different class sizes in different places. But I'm looking in particular at the K numbers at Cox and at LEAT,
Yep.
in which even changing classrooms from 3 to 2 in one school would still result in lower class sizes. So that's something we'd be more apt to hear about, perhaps as we're in Big Y or those kind. You know what I mean?
Absolutely right.
So we'll have to watch that.
What would the total is for the elementary is 1088. What
Correct.
would the comparable number last year be?
The number was higher because we did reduce some sections at the elementary this year. Interestingly, those reductions were made in 4th grade, where the numbers are much more stable. I'd have to go back and check, Mr. Sands. I know that we eliminated 2 elementary positions in this year's budget. One was at Jones, and one was at Cox, I believe, where we had large fourth grades graduating out. We
Right.
had cohorts of 4 sections graduating out of both of those schools, only being followed by 3. So while we have 60 sections at the elementary this year, we had 62 last year. So I'll have to check. Both the sections and the total is down, but I'd have to check what that number was.
What about the number last year for Guildford High School?
Guildford High School is remaining relatively stable. And again, I didn't bring in a comparison to last year. I can have that for you at your September meeting. I'll give you another update at your September meeting, and then we'll have the official numbers in October. And obviously, if there are any decisions made about staffing, I will inform the board of those decisions immediately. We've looked at taking a K position out of Cox and reassigning it somewhere else, but essentially it's moving. Right, we're looking at that. We're continuing.
No. And
It's just
again,
gonna change.
we know it's early. It's just that obviously, you could create 2 classes of 17 and 18, which would still be smaller
Yes.
than
Lead is.
So it's.
Yep.
Assuming our October 16 minutes are accurate, the enrollment last year was 3387 as opposed to 3321.
Thank you.
So, it's
As I
not a
said,
big
we've been
difference.
very stable, right around 3,400 now. Yep.
And that's quite the bubble class in 7th grade?
They're either doing seventh grade.
Correct.
Yeah.
But also remember, this is so preliminary.
Oh, no, I understand that. It's
The
just I
first
find
day
it
of
interesting,
school,
too.
there will be a lot of kids that have not registered at
Especially
all.
those K enrollments, and
Yeah.
we hope they come in at Cox. And not at Lee.
And there will be no-shows. The
Right.
people that have withdrawn that we were not, aware of
Yeah.
over the summer. Because it's not until when school starts, when other school districts are starting to request records, and sometimes parents move, and they're not even thinking about withdrawing. They're only thinking about enrolling.
Enrolling
Yeah,
in new
getting there,
education.
yep.
So, these are very, very, very preliminary, and I wouldn't, put a whole lot of stock in them. These are more of a general look right now.
The important piece is to know that we're monitoring and that I'm meeting with Mr. Fregola and Mr. Grimm particularly on a fairly regular basis.
Okay.
So I sort of hinted at the budget situation at the state level. The only update I have for the board is to say that we still do not have an idea of when the state may finalize their budget, have a state budget, and therefore have definitive numbers for us on education aid from the state level. I will let the board and the community know that I anticipate both a letter being released from Connecticut superintendents tomorrow and a press conference happening tomorrow where my colleagues and I will be encouraging the governor and the legislatures of the state to please finalize a budget and please confirm state education aid numbers so that we can plan moving forward. I do expect that as part of the press coverage, you will hear from a number of communities who are holding positions unfilled or freezing salary spending. I want to note that you will not hear a like situation here in Guildford, and I give great credit to the community and to the Board of Finance because this community has already assumed $1 million loss in education aid from the state. We have already built in $1 million contingency. And so at this point, I am filling the classroom positions that we have budgeted after assuming that $1 million loss in state revenue. I think it was wise to make that assumption. It has allowed us at the schools to actually hire and fill the positions that do remain in our budget. And if any decision from the state is more significant than $1 million loss, we will need to make adjustments moving forward. I believe that the town made a very thoughtful decision. We are being conservative in some other areas, and we will make adjustments if necessary. But I honestly believe that we are going to fall within that contingency and that we're making good decisions moving forward. But just wanted to highlight that you may experience some of that press. Please understand that we're moving ahead conservatively, and I think the town did us a huge favor by making that consideration early in the process and not leaving us not knowing as some other school districts are now not knowing. I don't know if board members have anything to add to that update. There's not a lot of information in there, and I'm aware of that, and I apologize.
Well, there's not.
There's nothing you can do about it.
I'm not sure we can blame you for this. You know, this. No, it's. I mean, it's an untenable situation, and you know, you're right. We did make plans, and we did make some assumptions, and I think, you know, Mr. Mazza and our board have been both very clear that we're not going back out and looking for more money, regardless of what the state does. There are not going to be supplemental tax bills. That is, I think everybody's been very clear about that. But it really, you know, I know I've said this before, but if you look at the budget process that we have in Guildford, on our sleepy little town of 21,000 people, I mean, it's so much healthier and reasonable than the one for the state of Connecticut, which is $20 billion and doesn't require a referendum. But I sometimes wonder what the effect of a referendum would be on passing a state budget. But I think I know the answer. But, it's just hard to understand.
Frustrating.
It's very frustrating.
Very frustrating.
And not fair.
Lack of information is very challenging.
But, well, you know. Oh, well. So, the other item on
the last formal item I have is just to remind the board, we have been working with other town boards and committees on an energy performance contract. The board has received presentations from the vendor with whom we have been working. I want to remind the board that we have engaged an outside engineer to review that contract. That engineer today, in a conference call with Cliff Gurnham and Mr. Bloss, gave some feedback and some questions that we think are very helpful. We're going to use that feedback and those questions to speak with the vendor again. We're going to share that information with the other town boards and committees, and we're continuing to explore the possibility of perhaps entering into an energy performance contract if we believe that it is beneficial and that it could be a cost savings for us. Continue to be very interested in the idea and want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence as we pursue the idea and make sure that we enter into the best contract possible for Guildford schools and the town at large. We'll continue to keep you apprised as we get a response to those questions and that feedback from the vendor.
Right.
And then it's not on the agenda, but I would like to add one other item, if I may. At your last regular meeting, this board approved an extension of my contract, and I just want to extend my appreciation. I very much appreciate you inviting me to continue. I very much appreciate the comments that were made. I'm sorry that I wasn't here to thank you in person, but I very much appreciate that. I very much value the work that we're doing together, and I look forward to a continued relationship with all of you and with the Guildford schools and the Guildford students. Thank you.
Well, you had a good reason. You were in Jordan.
I was actually in D.C.
for
that
meeting,
one. I was in Jordan last week.
Okay. Well, in kind of following up on it, in your packets, there's a letter from Professor Diane Ullman at the University of Connecticut School of Education that talks about, that I was copied on, that talks about how Dr. Freeman's presentation to their executive leadership program was very valued. And we've said this publicly, we've said it privately. We just think it's vitally important that you do that type of thing. I think it's good for us and it's good for you. And so we encourage you to keep doing that. And I think, by the way, it's not inconsequential that may be a source of your making connections to, recruit people to come to work in the Guildford Public Schools. And so I suspect that has happened and will continue to happen. So I thought this was a very thoughtful letter by Professor Ullman, and wanted to share that with everybody.
Thank you very much.
As well as your work in Jordan.
As well as your work in Jordan.
It is one of the most exciting things that I've been able to do.
You want to say something about it? What did you do?
So this last week I was invited to make an additional unplanned trip to Jordan. The module that was being presented this week was focused on curriculum instruction and assessment, and while I spent most of the week thinking that I should have been Ann Keene, it was really exciting to engage in that work at that level once again. And so this past week I worked with 35 public school principals from all over Jordan. They have been through a module on educational organizational structures. They have been through a model on climate and culture, and this was the module focusing on curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So we got to talk about the heart of learning and the heart of teaching. We talked about assessment. We talked quite a bit about the work that we're doing here in Guildford and how our principals work with students here in Guildford, and talking about it in a place where one principal who 2 years ago, who had a school of 450 students, now has a school of 900 because of the influx of Syrian refugees that she's received. Some of the most committed, some of the most hard-working professionals that I've been able to engage with, and they are happy to have us come, and they listen to what we have to share, and we work about how that will fit best into their schools and meet the needs of their students. And so to have had this opportunity has been one of the most exciting opportunities in my career. And I'll say again, I very much appreciate you understanding and encouraging that kind of work. It rejuvenates me and reminds me how lucky we are and how lucky our students are to go to school in a town like Guildford. I have one last visit scheduled. I'll be back in October, and as it stands now, that would be the end of my relationship, although I receive emails and I continue to be in communication and hope to stay in communication with some of those people, and I've extended an invitation to many of them to come visit us here in Guildford, so I hope someday to be able to bring those principals here and have them learn on-site with us, as well as being able to spend time with me over there. So I thank you again for the opportunity to do that.
Great.
Of course, that work coordinates with the fact that Guildford High is now an international baccalaureate school.
It fits very well. And Guildford High is a place, one of the few high schools in the state of Connecticut that teaches Arabic as a world language. And so there's a number of connections that are appreciated over there and really make me feel that there's a synergy to this work. It in no way draws away from what I can hopefully bring to Guildford. It just, I think, adds layers to what I hope I can bring to the students here in Guildford. I know that as we begin the International Baccalaureate program, and Mr. Buno is going to be teaching the Theory of Knowledge course for the first time, he has already asked if I would join his students and talk about the experiences in Jordan, and I can't wait to have that opportunity.
Great. Terrific. Okay, board agenda 9.1 is to act on personnel items. There is one resignation, Amy Sevigny, a special ed teacher at Jones. Is there a motion to ratify her resignation?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And Dr. Freeman, that was a personal, she was relocating or?
Yes, I believe she's relocating because of family changes, and she was sorry to be leaving us, and she will be missed.
And then there are 5 appointments. Sherry Stevens at Lakes, grade 2. Lily Keegan, language arts at Adams. Michelle Madnese, math at Guildford High. John Fody, the 3rd, science at Guildford High. And Charlie Jones, is that how you pronounce that?
Harley.
Harley. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose it would be Spanish.
Yes,
And that's what you get. That's what you get for having a French major. Read the Spanish teacher. Spanish at Jones. So is there a motion to ratify those appointments?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So is this everything for hiring?
No, we currently have a vacancy for another elementary world language position. Currently at Cox, we're having a very difficult time with the fill. We are currently beginning to look for a long-term sub to open the school year for us if we're unsuccessful in finding a permanent hire there. And we currently have, I believe that we have a part-time school social worker position that we're working to fill as well.
Why are we having so much trouble filling this world language position at Cox?
World language is a shortage area statewide. They're very difficult to find, and even
I thought that we were an attractive district to work in.
in world language, we actually have a slight difference. In world language, you will sometimes find teachers who would rather work in a setting where they may have a bilingual school, where there may be a richer ELL program. And so while we are attracting talent in a number of areas, attracting talent into world languages, in fact, may be one of our weakest areas, because some of the characteristics that make us a draw in math and science may not necessarily, we don't have We don't have a vibrant bilingual community in our schools right now, and some of the teachers who are going to be drawn into those subject areas might rather be in a setting where there are multiple language being spoken, not just in a pull-out language class, but more broadly in the community.
And this also requires an elementary certification as well as the foreign language certification. And my guess is that you're not getting a lot of people coming out of ed schools with
World language is a shortage area statewide, and it's exacerbated at the elementary level because of the dual certification requirement, correct? And the place where what I just described is most acute, because the elementary would be the place where you would in fact have a full bilingual school. Most of the other high schools, when you get to high school level, do tend to schedule and teach in the way that we do. But some language teachers might prefer to be in an elementary school where two languages are spoken all day long in all of the classes, and we don't offer that opportunity. Especially with that elementary certification, you could be in a regular classroom teaching that language that might be your passion.
Okay. 9.2 is to act on a textbook recommendation, a theory of knowledge course companion. That is, I think we were shown that last month. And very exciting class. I know my daughter is very much looking forward to Mr. Buno teaching that class.
Can't wait. Mr. Buno's chomping.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's a very inspired choice, I must say, of a person to teach that class. So is there a motion that we adopt that textbook?
So
9.2. Yep.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then 9.3 is to act on the mathematics standard level for the IB diploma program. That also we looked at last month. So a motion that we adopt that textbook.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 9.5 we're up to, which is the budget transfers. Ms. Trudeau, do you want to talk about this, or Ms. Sullivan, or?
Go ahead.
So you have a memo in your packet to request a budget transfer to close out the final end of the year. Sorry, I'm trying to find my copy here. So the request is to transfer to purchase services $19,500 and to capital $40,000 from funds in the tuition line, moving $59,500 out to the other two accounts. This will close out the year so that all our categories will be within budget, and we will end the year with everything in balance.
Okay. Is there a motion to transfer?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
And then 9.6 is to act on special ed transportation bids for 2017-18. We talked about that quite a bit in operations. The proposal by the administration is to award the different routes to the low bidders for, I think, 18 routes, I believe. And these are all prior suppliers, prior vendors that we've had good experiences with, and all of the bids are going to the low bidder. So is there a motion to award those bids?
So moved.
Second.
Questions? And the motion would read, I think, to, I know we're trying to be efficient, but, so the motion would be to approve the special ed transportation bid consistent with the Exhibit 9.6 to the lowest bidders for each of 18 routes. Okay? So all in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. 9.7 is to act on the custodial supply bid, and what is it that you want us to do? We talked about this in operations too, I know.
So there's 85 items, and of those 85 items, we have selected 5 vendors to be awarded various items, various pieces of those 85 items. So the request is to award to those 5 vendors with a low bidder on each of the 85 items.
Okay. Is there a motion? We've done this before, I know. Is there a motion to approve those bids?
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now we're picking up the pace a little bit here.
The lights are going on again.
The lights are going out. I mean,
Lights are hinting that
so next item on the agenda is 9.8, receive for possible action the wage and insurance reopener agreement for the nurses union. I think this was just a one-year
1 year.
proposal?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And I think both Dr. Moore and Mr. Kazin were on the negotiating committee, and neither is here tonight, so we don't have a board. Were you involved in this as well?
Yes, right.
Okay. Why don't you talk about this if you can?
Well, I mean, it was pretty straightforward in that we just had 1 year to negotiate, and we came to an agreement at 2.25 on the wages and a slight adjustment on the who pays for the health insurance. I would say that given where we ended up, there was certainly lots of discussion before we got there, but I think overall this is very much in keeping with the other agreements that we've negotiated this year, and I would recommend that the board approve it.
Okay, so that's a motion that we approve this. Is there a second?
Second.
Questions, comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 9.9 is to act on an agreement with Milliman Business Associates for protected health information and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to sign the agreement. I think it's actually technically the first selectman to sign the agreement, but this is the proposed agreement is in your packet, or was an exhibit to the email. This is really just to protect health information and to allow Mr. Spurgeon to continue to work on our behalf, with his having left Milliman. So it's just it truly is a formality, but the proposal is that Mr. Mazza, the first selectman, be allowed to sign this agreement with the town and on behalf of the Board of Education. So is there a motion to approve that agreement?
So moved.
Second.
And to authorize Mr. Mazza to sign on our behalf? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 9.10 is to act on recommendations from the policy committee. Do you want to
Yes.
summarize?
So we brought both the policy and regulation 6800, student wellness, nutrition, and physical activity, to the board's attention last month. We're asking that you act on both the changes to the policy and the changes to the regulation tonight. I didn't receive, I know we had some discussion at our last meeting. I didn't receive any further comments, questions, or requests in that time. The policy, again, 6800, was last, as I think I've mentioned several times, these were thoroughly updated 3 years ago in 2014. There is now a state requirement that we review them every 3 years. So the Health and Wellness Committee, in fact, did that over the past year. So we're presenting the policy with only one change found on the first page, which is truly simply an update to make sure that we are appropriately reflecting the standards that our dining services have to follow in providing food, which is Erica is very much a part of the committee and was extremely helpful in looking over these policies with those requirements and regulations in mind. So I make a motion that we accept the updated policy with this one change under Section B.
Okay. This motion has been made. Second?
I'll second that.
Any questions, comments? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 9.10.2, which is a revisions to the regulation.
Right. So the regulations have a few more changes, though, again, none particularly substantial because of the thorough review done 3 years ago. You'll notice on the first page that some of these are language changes. Again, under food, we have Erica's input in keeping us in line with the regulations and requirements of the state in terms of food in schools. On page 2, we've removed the section POS cash register system. This was the old system that tracked food sales in the schools. We no longer use it. And I believe there, on the fourth page, section C, there's a language cleanup change, very minor. And then lastly, on the second to last page, we looked over the requested membership for the committee and removed local community partner or PTO or GHS Connection team member, not because we would love to have that involvement, but that has not been someone who's been a regular participant on this committee. The committee does involve
Parents.
I mentioned Erica. It does involve parents. Erica, again, the district food manager. We have the school nurse, school medical advisor, Board of Ep representatives, students. It's actually a good cross-section of people. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I will put forth the motion that the board accept the updates to this regulation coming from the Health and Wellness Committee.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any questions?
I had mentioned it at our last meeting, which is just such a minor change, but on the regulation that under beverages, that maybe we should just say applicable to grades K through 5 only. It's pretty self-explanatory for our purposes, but it almost seems like the other schools are excluded from the regulation totally.
So we added that grade K through 5. Do you not see that on your copy?
Oh, I do, but so what I'm saying, it's sort of semantics, but what I'm saying is that the way it reads, I wonder if we should just say applicable to grades K through, this regulation is applicable to K through 5 only. What I'm getting at is in the older grades, would somebody read into this and say, that we can't have these items in the older grades because there's no regulation for it. It just reads funny to me. But if that's just me, then I'm fine with leaving it. I just feel like
it now. Hold on.
it wasn't changed from last time we spoke. I brought it up at the last meeting.
So Terry added the grades K through 5 only thinking she was responding to your request, so that may just have been a miscommunication.
Oh, I think this was in here at our last meeting, the grades K through 5 only.
And so what you're suggesting is to add a word or two that suggests that this
just clarifying.
It's the 8-ounce requirement
Right.
that is in fact applicable to grades K through 5. That specifically is what the
I should have thought a little bit more about the verbiage that I thought would be appropriate, which I didn't, so I apologize.
Could you just say not exceeding 8 ounces may be sold to students in grades K through 5 on school grounds, and that kind of puts it in there, and that's, doesn't address the 12 ounces or the 16 ounces of anything else, but it kind of embeds it into the piece.
Or do you just go to the top and it says, as required by Connecticut law, in grades K through 5
yes,
only?
I think that's even better.
Right, I think now it reads as a sentence, and it makes it clear that everything to follow only applies to those grades K through 5. 6 through 12 are not impacted by the restrictions.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a friendly amendment to the proposal, I take it. So have you got that, Dr. King?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
So then as amended, motion's been made and seconded, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Committee reports. Anything else for the policy committee?
No, there. Mr. Bowden and I have talked about meeting again. We were going to try to do it in the summer to start addressing anything coming out of the legislature. Of course, they seem to be
As soon as I crack
otherwise occupied. Truly, I will check in with Mr. Bowden to see whether that adding a meeting at this point makes sense. And then we will let everyone else know. But we have not met yet this summer, so nothing to report.
Okay. Operations committee? Nothing?
Covered up.
Okay. Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Committee? Anything?
We don't meet in the summer.
Don't meet in the summer, so town committee liaisons? I think it's been quiet. And then the Learn Board, I think Dr. Moore proposed trying to find a replacement to that, but we may be able to deal with that either in the fall or unless somebody knows that they want to do it. It's just a tough time for people who work. But,
Yeah.
I don't think they're meeting over the summer. I will continue to attend executive committee meetings. It might make sense to wait until you have a new board impaneled before looking for the replacement. You have more people to ask.
Okay. Public questions? No? We do have a brief executive session, I know, we're to talk about the clerical and paraprofessional union negotiations. So is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we will adjourn, come into public session from the executive session only for the purposes of adjourning, and there will be no further public votes this evening. Thank you.